Hey everyone, Harold Fisher here, anchor and host of the Daily Drum on WHUR. Welcome to another edition of HUR at Home on WHUR.com and all of our social media platforms. On the same night as the first presidential debate, this is the perfect time to talk about a very crucial issue for all of us, voting. One of the largest health movement and nonprofit organizations for Black women and girls, GirlTrek, is relaunching its Get Out the Vote effort. And tonight, I'm talking to Ebony Andrews, National Director of Strategic Initiatives for GirlTrek. Ebony, thanks for joining me. I appreciate the conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me here, especially tonight.
Absolutely. Talk to me about, first of all, the relaunch of this voter initiative. Why a relaunch?
Because it's not new to us that the power of Black women's voices need to be heard. Like, we need to step up and we need to make sure when it comes to advocating for the things that we need in our community, advocating for what we know is good for us, although the current policies don't always reflect us, that's not going to change if we're not making sure our voice is heard. So Black Girl Justice League is about rallying our power to know what's best for our community and putting that power into how we vote.
Talk to me a little bit about GirlTrek for those who aren't familiar with it. Kind of give me the cliff notes of this organization.
Happy to. So GirlTrek is, as you said, the nation's largest nonprofit and health organization for Black women and girls. What we focus on is what it means to save the lives of Black women, because Black women are dying faster and earlier than any other group of people. And for us, that looks like saving ourselves first. And that can start with as simple as putting one foot in front of the other to walk for 30 minutes a day. That also, as it relates to Black Girl Justice League and other things like that, is owning what it means to take care of yourself and your community and what justice for you looks like. And I'm not just talking about justice how we usually think about it, but when we think about our right to joy, our right to happiness, our right to self-care, how so many things are inequitable as it relates to Black women, and it impacts our health outcomes. So GirlTrek is about being empowered enough to, one, claim time for yourself to walk in self-care, and two, once you do that, to save your next, to reach back and save a sister, to be on the front lines of what matters in your community, and to really be about the uplifting and the longevity of Black women's lives and joy.
This comes at a really interesting time. Obviously, we are just weeks away from a presidential election, and not just presidential election, certainly, but also down ballots from, in some cases, members of Congress, Senate, all the way down, quite possibly to your local council member. What kinds of conversations are you having with your constituency about not just getting out the vote, but motivating people to vote? Because I'm sure you've heard, there are still some people, particularly Black people, and maybe even some Black women, who are not committed to doing it.
So part of the conversation is education, and I'll get to that. But I think another part of the conversation comes before we even talk about voting and ballots. But looking to, one thing that GirlTrek is big on is that a lot of the answers and the solutions to what we're struggling with now have already been presented. So when we look to the stories of our foremothers and our ancestors, and we look at Fannie Lou Hamer and people that rallied people because they knew that our voice was important, we think a lot of that motivation comes to hearing the stories and lessons of our ancestors, knowing what our foremothers went to, knowing the power of their voice and the power of that work and where it got us, and how we can't leave that to rest now. And a big way that we share those stories is this year GirlTrek launched the Black History Bootcamp podcast. It started in June. It's a 21-day series, and we're actually about to start the third season of it on Thursday. But each of those episodes is dedicated to telling the story of a foremother or a forefather and what there is to learn from their story in terms of rallying for ourselves, in terms of empowering our community, in terms of just survival, and being true to like our experience as Black people, as women in this country, and knowing that some of the answers are in the people that came before us, and then some of them are in us coming together to take those lessons and push them forward. And when we get to voting, I think a lot of it is not just thinking about the now, but thinking about where we've come from and letting that help influence the now. But then even from there, using that to help envision what comes in the future.
Mhm. You know, voting obviously a very, very big deal, and this relaunch extremely important, but also the voices of Black women. And you don't have to go way back into history, but just where we are right now in some difficult and unfortunate times. We've lost the public servant voice of Breonna Taylor, but we have the voices of her mother and her aunt right now. And we also have, for example, the voices of the women in George Floyd's family, and the women in Ahmaud Arbery's family. Beyond the vote, from the perspective of GirlTrek, how important is it to have the voice of Black women right now?
It's important now and every day because one, the experience of many Black women isn't isolated. While with things being in the news and in your heart and in your mind every day, so hearing their stories and being able to share their stories, and then understanding that one, them sharing their stories is a part of the healing, and that's a healing that needs to happen collectively. Like they're not going through this alone. We see it and feel it every day. So I think one of the things that kills Black women, and GirlTrek considers it one of the 3 I's that are taking the lives of Black women early. Isolation is one, and that's the one I'm speaking to. Injustice and inactivity. So isolation doesn't serve us. Isolation doesn't empower. So us being able to tell our stories, each individual Black woman, and then for us to be able to rally around other Black women as they tell their stories and be a part of that healing and recognize that the pain is real and recognize that it's collective, like that's essential in the steps forward. That's essential to the healing process. And if no one else is looking for Black women the way that we should, or that they should, then it's up to us to collectively rally together and be a part of a collective healing for each other.
I said in the beginning of this that this interview is happening, and for our viewers and for those who watch this later, this is happening literally in the minutes before the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What do you look for, or what will you look for tonight, assuming I'm sure that you are going to be watching the debate tonight? So, what are you looking for? What are you looking to hear from either candidate?
So for me, debates are performative. While I think they are important and to listen to, and I'll be tuning in just like everyone else, what I'm actually studying and what I'm paying attention to doesn't happen at a presidential debate. It's the person that you've built leading up to this moment, not the talking points that someone has served you. So when it comes to voting and picking your candidate, like GirlTrek is a nonprofit, a 501c3, so we don't tell you which way to choose, but we say, listen to what people have to say now in the midst of crisis, in the midst of Breonna Taylor's murderers, none of them being charged, in the midst of racial unrest, in the midst of everything, in the midst of a pandemic that's attacking Black people, or where Black people are falling victim to at higher rates than anyone else. Like, listen to what people have said along those lines and how you feel about it. Not just what they can say when the lights are on and a performance is happening. What has their voting said? Like, what has their past said? What do the people that they rally around them say? Because I know that my grandmother always told me the company you keep shows a lot about you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I asked also what you're, from the perspective of GirlTrek, what you're telling your constituents. What are your constituents telling you right now?
Our constituents are telling us a variety of things because the election is one thing, but they're also telling us about things that go on in their community. They're telling us about the power of them being able to feel like connected and to hear lessons and stories from their foremothers and Black History Bootcamp. They're telling us about some of the hardships that they've had in this pandemic. We gave away I want to say $500,000 in the beginning of Corona. We opened a grant to be able to help women in hardship. In less than 24 hours, we had more requests than we had money to give. So our what we hear from our members is the struggle that Black women are facing, the isolation that Black women are facing, how hard and heavy it feels, also how empowering some things feel, the joy that they feel. And when we take the dynamic spectrum of everything that's going on in all of our lives, in each individual's life, and in my life, and the heaviness and the lightness and the joy and the frustration. Um, and think about not just, like I say, not just the election, but when we take that and envision how we feel now and what path we want to be on and what our future vision looks like, then it's looking at this moment and not only thinking about how you want to place your vote, but what do you demand or request of that person that's going to fill that office on November 4th or that decision on November 4th. So one thing is the election, but two is despite who wins and where that goes, knowing what you require, what we require, what we will demand, what we will continue to work for, what Black Girl Justice League will rally for.
How do you know if your relaunch and other efforts like that are working and are connecting with Black
Um, I would say that they're working by the stories that we hear. But other than that, I would say it's working because we're being a part of what's needed to combat um, people not knowing where to go in terms of, or even how to navigate, let's say, voting by mail in this process, or early voting, or what their guidelines are for their state, or all the different ways that people are removing people from voter rolls and all of those types of things. So being a source of education for those that are lost, I know even for myself, when we're talking, because before absentee ballots, now we call it vote by mail. What does vote by mail mean? When are those dates happening? If you vote by mail, can you be sure that they received your ballot? And in the midst of, at one point when we're talking about blue mailboxes being removed from the street, like how the process works and how to do it. And then not even just to understand it for yourself, but to understand it and be able to help the next person. So part of Black Girl Justice League's success is not just rallying the 800,000 women that represent GirlTrek around voting by mail and early voting, but once we get our ballots in the box, how do we convince and bring on 5 of our friends and family members so that by the time that early voting and voting by mail is done, us and our family is taken care of. And then on election day, we can be of service to the community. We could be out there giving people rides to wherever they're voting. We could be out there for the people that might be waiting in line all day with meals, with water, with blankets, with whatever our people need, because it doesn't just stop once we do ours. So I say we're successful in the community that we're building around it by the true and genuine concern. And then just by people understanding that their voice has power.
Yeah. Well, you didn't get to 800,000 overnight. And that's definitely showing, some progress, and hopefully, after November 4th, we will once again be able to talk about the kind of impact that Black women and the vote are having on the electorate and this country as well. Ebony Andrews, I really, really appreciate you spending some time with us. And I tell people, today, get out the popcorn and the jujubes. It's going to be interesting tonight.
It is. And I also will encourage people that want to know more about GirlTrek or Black Girl Justice League, go to girltrek.org, follow GirlTrek on Instagram, We are a resource for Black women. We're a lifeline for Black women. Our goal is to rally 1 million Black women around their healthiest, happiest lives. So if you are a Black woman trying to walk in that direction, go to GirlTrek.org, take the pledge, walk with us, rally with us today and every day.
And register. And make sure that you get out there by mail, at the polls, absentee, however it's done, get it done.
Election, you can walk up right there and drop your ballot off there. You don't have to wait on the postman. There's so many ways.
And make sure you take somebody with you if you go to the polls. There you go. Ebony Andrews with GirlTrek. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and stay safe.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of HUR at Home. I'm Harold Fisher. And as always, I'll see you on the radio.